my name is Ann Kent. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist and the owner of Peas and Happiness. Last week I shared one of my favorite resources for our eco-friendly journey, which was Tiny Yellow Bungalow. So I wanted to follow that up with some of the different ways that we've been moving towards a more eco-friendly lifestyle and reducing waste in our own kitchen. Now, I want to preface this by saying that we are by no means perfect. We have definitely not reached our goal in sustainable living, and I was hesitant at first, honestly, to share where we are right now. But then I decided, we're never going to be absolutely perfect, or it's going to take a lot of work to get perfect. And so I wanted to just share with you a snapshot of where we are, what we've done, some of the simple changes we made, and hopefully this can inspire you to make a few changes in your own kitchen. So these are a few ways that we have reduced, we're working to reuse, and we are composting some of the things in our house. Now, I will also say that I'm choosing composting rather than recycling because, as you may know, recycling currently is not very economically viable. And so in most cities, recycling actually isn't necessarily recycled. Oftentimes recycling is either contaminated by something in the mix, somebody not cleaning out their peanut butter jar well enough, or throwing away the wrong type of plastic, or it's just not financially viable to actually recycle. And so oftentimes recycling can still end up in the landfill, which means that it's even more important for us to do those first two things, reducing and reusing, and then focusing on things that are eventually going to break down in the landfill instead of things that are going to last for years and years. So let's just get started and jump into the reducing section. So when I first started on this journey of eco-friendly, I looked around the grocery store and noticed how many things came in plastic. And so I started trying to minimize the plastic that we use. Now, we still have plastic in our life, but one of the things that I've done is I've started to shop at the butcher counter instead of always buying pre-packaged meat. This helps me get rid of the styrofoam, and although usually there is plastic wrapped around the meat, most of this is wrapped in paper, and it's much less than the traditional meat that you would pick up in the meat section. The next thing I've done is I've switched from all of the individually wrapped reusable items. So for example, I like to cut up our large blocks of cheese and just put them in a reusable Tupperware container instead of using single-use cheese sticks. And again, while the original cheese still does come in plastic, this has really reduced our amount of waste. So that's another thing that's been a relatively easy switch. Something else I do, which is a little bit more difficult in COVID times, is I buy in bulk. So these are walnuts, and you can see they're even in a reusable bag, which I actually was able to purchase at Sprouts, but I'll drop a link to the Tiny Yellow Bungalow who sells these in her shop as well. So this is really handy. You can simply rewash your bag and then take it to the store, and I actually just store the walnuts in the freezer in the bag like this, or you can of course transfer them to another jar. Another way that I like to reduce, this may seem silly, but we love to host large parties when we are able to. So for example, at our annual Friendsgiving, which we're hoping to have in 2021, instead of buying plastic silverware and plastic plates, I actually have an old set of silverware that I use for those occasions. Now this just sits in our pantry. It's all mismatched and not very nice, but everybody loves using real silverware instead of the plastic, and that's just another easy way to reduce our plastic. So those are some of the main ways that we've started, but if you have other ideas of how to reduce waste in your kitchen, drop a comment and I would love to hear yours. So let's move on to reusing. Now, of course, when we talk about reusing, I think a lot of times we think about the totes. This is my favorite tote that my friend designed that I sell. I Totes Love Veggies, which is, of course, really great to decrease the amount of plastic and paper. In addition to the totes, they are also, I showed you the bulk bags that you can use for not just things like candy or walnuts or those small items, but you can also use some of those for things like flour if you have an option for bulk shopping. And I also have these produce bags. So this has been a super great way to get rid of those annoying single-use plastic bags in the produce aisle that you cannot recycle. They are of a poor plastic quality, and so even in the best of times, we're not recycling those bags. Another thing that's really popular is Ziploc bags, which of course are very flimsy flimsy and you can reuse them, but they definitely get holes after a while. So they've come up with some of these different silicone reusable bags. I love silicone because it is heat resistant. So if you wanted to heat something or put a hot liquid in here, you can. This seals at the top. There's a couple different designs. Again, Tiny Yellow Bungalow has some options on her website. Stasher Bag is a really popular brand, but those work really well. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't use these a lot because I find them difficult to wash. And so instead, I simply use the reusable Tupperware for almost everything. And I have recently discovered that using, just like my mom and grandma have always done, reusing the old plastic tubs from different containers has been really handy, because when I do have friends over for dinner and I want to send home leftovers, I can send them home in one of these Tupperware containers that I don't care if I ever get back. They're getting a new life, and maybe they can even be reused again. Currently, I'm using these to store my vegetable scraps in here. So I've just cut off the ends of some of my veggies, which I put in the freezer, and I will eventually use this to make some vegetable stock out of. So that's a really handy way to reuse that. Another thing I wanted to show you was that you can actually reuse glass jars as well. So this used to be maraschino cherries, and now it is vegetable broth, you can see. You can freeze in glass jars. The trick is to make sure that you leave some space at the top. I've had some accidents where the glass jars break, but as long as you leave some space at the top, you can freeze. This is vegetable broth, like I mentioned. These are peaches that we canned this summer. So freezing in these glass jars is super handy, and eventually we found a pasta sauce that happens to come in a jar with the correct size lid that you can reuse, and you can actually buy lids that fit directly on those, so it's really easy to reuse those things. And switching over to those glass and freezing and heating in those, you're not going to get any of the chemicals that can leach from the plastic, so definitely a better option there. A couple other reusable options, I've talked about this before, but this is my silicone baking mat. I just rediscovered this. I used to think that this is really only for cookies, and I don't do a lot of baking. I'm not a very good baker, but I do roast a lot of vegetables and potatoes. And I used to hate to roast potatoes because they always stick to the pan, but they do not stick to this. So this is just as good and maybe even better than parchment paper. And if you roast, or if you're having trouble with things sticking to your pan, I would highly recommend to invest in one of those. The last thing I'll show you in our reuse section are these wax paper. They're actually coated cotton. These can be used in place of plastic wrap on top of things. This is actually a bag, so instead of these silicone bags, you can also use these little bags for things like snacks. You could use these for dry goods and take them with you. And then you simply wash this in warm water. These last for about a year and a half, depending on how often you use them, but then they do completely biodegrade. So that's a really nice option for both the reuse and then this composting section, which is where we're heading. So in terms of composting, really what I'm talking is about things that are biodegrading. So instead of trying to recycle things that may or may not be recycled, what can we do that is just gonna break down and be happier for the earth? So one thing that you can find if you don't want to just reuse and invest in a set of mismatched silverware, you'd rather do some disposable silverware, they do actually have compostable cutlery and also cups and plates. So of course you can do something simple too, like just using paper instead of the plastic clear ones, but they actually do also have clear compostable cups. We used those when we hosted our outdoor wedding reception, and that was a really good option, knowing that we weren't going to throw away pounds and pounds of plastic. Something else that we've found to switch over is our soap. So although this says 7th generation, which is generally one of the better soaps for the environment, I was still frustrated that it came in a plastic bottle. So there are several different options for some plastic-free soaps. One is to buy a soap bar. This is actually laundry detergent, but they also have hand soap and dish soap that you can reconstitute at home. So it's shipped in cardboard, and then you don't have to ship all of the water and think about all that transportation cost, both monetarily and also environmentally, but then you can reconstitute this in your bottle at home. What I'm using right now is actually a brand called ET, which is ETEE. I will drop a link in the description for you to find that online if you would like. That is ultra concentrated dish soap that you reconstitute with water, and it comes in wax tubes. So again, it's more eco-friendly than your typical option that comes in plastic. So still working on finding the perfect soap. If someone has a recommendation, drop a link. I know Tiny Yellow Bungalow also has a couple of options on her website. So the last thing in terms of compostability, I wanted to bring up paper towels. So we use a brand called Who Gives a Crap, which is a company that makes different paper products, not just paper towels. They also make toilet paper and tissues, and they are concerned with the supply side of things. So you can find either recycled or bamboo paper, which both of those options are definitely more sustainable. We've decided to go with the recycled option because we would like to create a market for recycled paper. Again, thinking about that being a viable option for our system. Again, if you have any recommendations or products that you love or ways that you found that you can switch out that are easy, please drop a link. I am always interested in learning to hear what you are doing, and it's great to have other friends who are on this eco-friendly journey with me. So thank you for taking the time. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.